Wax on, wax dead. Hey everyone, welcome to Princess of Gay. I'm your host Connie, and today we are here with the original 1953 House of Wax. So, fun fact, this was Sid Haig's favorite horror movie. If you don't know, Sid Haig was the actor who played Captain Spaulding in the Firefly trilogy of movies. And yeah, he said in an interview, I actually saw this on TikTok, and that's why I decided to react to this week. But he said in interviews, he was asked what his favorite horror movie was, and he said House of Wax. He saw it on opening night back when it first debuted in theaters in the early 50s, and he said it like just really impressed him. It's one of the first 3D films, and he said it just like wowed him in a way that I guess few others have. He also mentioned that another of his favorite horror movies is oh god, what was it? Oh, my mind is blanking on that. Cujo, which we have already reacted to on this channel, and I even admitted back when we watched it that Cujo was surprisingly scary. Like it was a lot better than I ever expected it to be, considering it's a very simple concept and a very real concept. It's not monsters or serial killers or anything. It's just a rabid dog. But it was surprisingly really well done to the point where it was actually scary. And I have to give massive kudos to Cujo as well because of that. So, what do I know about this movie? Well, I have actually seen the remake of House of Wax, the one with, I believe, Jared Padalecki from Supernatural, as well as Paris Hilton. And also, I think the voice actor for Patrick from SpongeBob is weirdly in it. I think he has this, like, big rant during a part of the movie where I think he actually even, like, cusses. And it's, like, just the weirdest thing to hear Patrick Star cuss. I mean, I know he's a person and an actor outside of just that one role, but like everybody knows him for that. So, and you can hear it in his voice too. So it's like it's weird. But yeah, I saw that movie like once or twice around the time it originally came out, maybe a little bit after. And it didn't really leave a huge impact on me. I know a lot of people at the time and even since have said that it's just nowhere near as good as the original, that it's kind of crappy even. And I never saw the original. Because at the time when I watched the remake, I didn't watch a lot of older movies. I was, at that time, not exactly the most willing to check out a lot of older stuff. But since then, I have seen a lot more, and I have opened up my interests a lot more than they used to be. And I mean, obviously, I'd seen older movies before that, but I just wasn't as willing to check them out. But since then, I became a lot better with that, and so I'm very open to this. Now, I know that this movie stars Vincent Price, basically the most famous, most legendary name of horror. Like, there is no name in horror who is bigger than him. I stand by that. Like, you can name anyone involved in the horror industry, from directors to actors. No one is bigger than him. And I honestly don't know if anyone ever will be. Like, Vincent Price shaped horror. And going into this, I know that this is, by today's standards, not going to be very exceptional in terms of scares. I want to judge it as best as I can by what this movie would have been back then. But I also acknowledge that I can't entirely do that. I am living in 2024. I have seen the more modern stuff. there's not really a way for me to see it in the eyes of someone who would have been watching it back then. It's not possible. I'm gonna give it a fair chance, and I'm going to judge it based on its own merits, though. I'm not going to just try to compare it to everything else. I'm going to judge it based on what it gives, and I think that's the most fair way to do it. Um, I think that there's not really a better way to handle it at this point. But yeah, I'm interested to see what Sid Haig sees in this movie. Like what was so amazing and special about it. I've also heard that the remake is very different from this. And all I remember about the remake is I think that people were being turned into wax statues or something. Something like that. So I'm wondering if that's not even part of this original. I genuinely don't know. Um, but I'm very willing to find out, to see what this is like, and hopefully it ends up just genuinely really impressing me. Like, that's always the hope. Um, but yeah, so I don't know exactly what to expect from this. I don't even know if this is in black and white or color. I don't know when color was first introduced, but it could have been you know, turned into color later on, and this could be a color copy. You know what I mean when a black and white movie is later colorized after the invention of color TV and everything came out and all. They like after the fact add the color in. They've done that for quite a lot of movies and stuff. I'm wondering if this could be one of them. Um, Again, I don't know if the movie is going to be in black and white or color here. I don't mind either way because my favorite movie is in black and white, so it doesn't matter really to me. It's just I'm curious. Um, Besides Vincent Price, I don't know who else is in this. Of course, I don't know if I would even recognize any other names, to be fair, unless they were in 12 Angry Men, then probably. Funny thing is, I think 12 Angry Men came out in 56. Let me see if I can find out real quick. But this came out in 53, so that would mean this is notably a few years older. 57 is when 12 Angry Men came out. I was 1 year off. So 1957 compared to 1953. So that's a 4 year difference. This movie came out 4 years before what is my favorite movie of all time currently. And I don't know if that'll ever be usurped because 12 Angry Men is one of the few films I consider perfect. Um, but yeah, it's I have no idea what I'm gonna get from this. But I'm excited to find out. I've seen other horror movies from I guess around this time, the classic Dracula and Wolfman and stuff. I've seen those in the past, but I'm just curious. This is going to be an interesting experience going back in time and really getting to see a movie that inspired and, just really like well, just inspired. There's another word I was trying to think of and my mind blanked again, but really inspired another huge name in horror. Sid Haig was phenomenal. He did such a great job bringing Captain Spaulding to life, and even though I didn't know the character for as long as a lot of other people, because I only recently got into the Firefly trilogy, still, he left an impact for sure. Um, but yeah, excuse me. Either way, we're going to get into this and hope for the best with this film. So, when the screen fade. Oh, by the way, I forgot to mention this is a donation reward for Venom. I almost forgot to mention that. So just giving you your credit where it's due, Venom. Thank you for donating as always. But yeah, this is let's get this started. I'm getting all mixed up again. So when the screen fades to black, pause this redirect and go to the description below. Follow the link to the reaction, and after you watch it, come back here to the redirect and resume play. Because after it fades to black, then fades back in, everything from that point forward will be my afterthoughts and will contain spoilers to the movie. So, that being said, thank you so much for tuning in, and I will see you at the reaction. And we are back, and we'll begin with spoilers in 3, 2, 1, now. So I was doing a little research in between the reaction and these afterthoughts because I wanted to see exactly how different the remake was, the House of Wax remake with Paris Hilton and Jared Padalecki, and others like Alicia Cuthbert and Chad Michael Murray. And I looked up basically just the synopsis of the film, and it's very different. It's entirely different. The plot is literally nothing like this at all. Like, it's not even similar. The only similarity is that there's wax figures made from real people's corpses. That is literally the only thing similar. But I did find out that this movie itself is actually a remake of a 1933 film called Mystery of the Wax Museum. And I looked up the synopsis of that, and it's pretty much exactly the same. The plot is pretty much exactly the same. The only differences are a few different little tweaks here and there, as well as the names being different. But otherwise, the actual plot is the same, even down to the Marie Antoinette focus with the main character. So, yeah. Or main villain, main character, you could say either way. So that's really interesting to me. And also, apparently, that in and of itself is based off of a book. So that's even interesting, too. Even more interesting as well, I should say. But yeah, it's based on a short story called The Waxworks by Charles S. Belden. So this actually has quite a few different quite a few different adaptations or stages to this adaptation. It was a short story that became a 1933 film, that became a 1953 film, that became a 2005 film. So it's like there's 3 different adaptations that all stemmed from the same short story. So that's wild to me. And the 2005 adaptation went in a completely different direction. But yeah. So what are my thoughts on this? Let's actually get to that. Well, I would say it's good. I wouldn't call this great. I wouldn't call it amazing. It's definitely not up there with favorite horror movies or anything. But like I said in the pre-thoughts, a lot of that comes down to the fact that I am in 2024. I have seen so much nowadays that this really isn't that great to me in terms of writing, in terms of scares, in terms of shock factor and whatnot. But back in the day when this came out, of course, it would be insane to see. But in terms of today's quality, it's nothing. It's not scary, it's not intimidating, it's not shocking or anything. But again, that's just gonna happen when you're watching a 70-year-old movie in 2024. So much is going to be different in terms of how horror is viewed nowadays and how it's portrayed on screen, that something like this just isn't going to affect things the same. And so, like I said, I wanted to kind of judge this based more entirely on its own merits, rather than just trying to compare it to the modern day. Though, again, I can't help but think about that at least a little, because I do have to view this as a horror movie, and compared to current horror, it's not as impactful. But for the time, this absolutely would have had an insane impact. Also, the 3D moments are so blatantly obvious. When the dude's, bouncing the paddle balls towards the screen. It's oh my, that is so obviously just for the 3D. It's they wanted to show off a little bit. So let's talk about this a little more. So the story itself is fairly straightforward. It's not just a revenge tale, but it's a tale of a guy who was driven insane by a business partner's greed, corruption, and psychopathy. And he, in turn, became a psychopath himself, a murderous, violent psychopath. And it's a story that, of course, nowadays it's like, oh, I've seen this so many times before, but still works, I feel, because you understand why the professor got to the point he did. You understand why he became psychotic and evil and whatnot. But I also like that he's a functioning psychopath in the manner that he's not like just all kooky and crazy. No, he actually has, his intellect about him still. He's very well spoken. He's intelligent. And that makes him more threatening. Those kind of psychopaths are the most dangerous because they know how to blend into society. They know how to make themselves seem innocent, which is what he did. That is how he got this House of Wax up and running. That is how he was able to trick people for as long as he did. And the time period, by the way, is not entirely clear. It's not clear how long after his supposed death all of this started taking place. It's got to be some time because the business partner, I don't remember all the names, by the way, but he was talking about to Kathy. He was saying things like, oh, well, they've been like fighting with me at the insurance office about like, no, they haven't been able to find a body. They need to confirm the death. But I worked it out. They relented. I got the money and everything just this afternoon. So it's like it has to have been some time. They would have had to, handle everything with the building and making sure, or like trying to find the body and everything and all the paperwork and all that goes with that. So it would have had to be in at least probably a few months. And considering we do see the one dude return who was supposed to return after 3 months in the current timeline, I think that's probably the time frame we have, 3 months. The main story takes place 3 months after the cold open, you could say. Jared's death and everything, quote unquote. But we see like he originally goes after, his business partner, which makes sense, but then he also goes after the fiance of his business partner, Kathy. And I didn't quite get that at first, but it seemed like it was mostly centered around, wanting to build up his museum. It wasn't a revenge thing at that point. It was just because he was crazy. And we see these interactions before Kathy's death of her and her friend Sue, who is one of the main characters in this. And Sue is this like unemployed woman who's, best friends with Kathy. She's trying to do her best and everything, and I'm sorry, it's pretty damn clear that she has a crush on Kathy. Maybe it's just seeing this movie through, again, being in 2024, being super gay and seeing all of this content nowadays that is gay. But it's like this was a thing, believe it or not, in the old days where a lot of like movies and books and whatnot would portray queer people in subtle ways because, that wasn't anywhere near socially acceptable at the time. Queerness was, looked down upon for a lot of reasons. And so if you actually like look into it, there's a lot of books and even movies from like older generations that subtly implant that stuff in there. And you could say like, oh, but it's like she's just a friend. She's just being friendly and nice. And it's like, listen, that entire I know every line of her face thing, that is not just a friend. I'm sorry. Even best friends aren't that fucking close. to know every line and detail of a person's face. It's like that is a line that is very specifically romantically coded. Like I can't view that any other way. But the thing is, with this, if you view it that way, it also kind of makes it a little more tragic because Kathy was, engaged to this scumbag, honestly. Um, and, here this girl, Sue, just has a big old crush on her, but knows she can't get with her because of, society as well as, you know, other issues regarding that time and everything. And it's like, it's sad. It's just really sad that she then had to, like, find Kathy's body, her dead corpse and everything. It's like, that's just, depressing. Honestly, you feel really bad for Sue, and even outside of like the romantic subtext, you definitely just feel bad for Sue anyway. So it really succeeds at giving us that kind of emotional connection to one of the main characters. And I like that they did that because none of the other main characters are really like that connectable at all. Like the one guy, her friend, Sue's friend, I can't remember his name right now. That kind of proves the point, though. I don't remember him that much. He's a nice guy. He's a sculptor as well. That's pretty much it. Like, he doesn't have much personality outside of that, and none of the characters really do, except for, you know, Kathy, him, the business partner, and Professor Jared. They're the ones who are the main characters, and they're the ones who have the most, well, actual character. Everyone else is just kind of bland, if I'm being honest. And it's not the actor's fault. The characters just don't have enough to do and don't have enough to them. Like, you could say, like, the one guy, the drunk, who was secretly, the escaped convict, he had a little more to him, but that was mostly delivered in exposition and only shown, like, in one scene. So it's not as exciting. Um, but Sue was definitely the most likable character. And the second character with the most to them was Professor Jared. Those were the two best characters in terms of writing and everything. In terms of acting, I mean, obviously Vincent Price was the best. That's just unquestionable. I mean, and it's not even just a nostalgia thing or saying like, oh, just because it's Vincent Price. No, he was really fucking good in this. Like, even just his mannerisms while like skulking around and everything were just really good and really felt right. Obviously, if you compare to how acting is nowadays, it's a very different kind of acting, but still, for these kinds of movies back in the day, he did an amazing job, as he typically always did. There's a reason why he's such a massive legend in horror movie history. So, after that, we also have the effects, or I guess lack thereof, because this movie didn't really do much of anything in regards to that. Like, yeah, you have the wax sculptures that look like the actors and whatnot, but other than that, it's like you don't really have much of any effects. There's not like really a lot of blood and gore or anything. Even for the murders we do see, there's not like a lot of like cool special effects to anything besides like the 3D stuff at the time. Even with like, you never even see like any of the wax figures like break or see any like pieces of like the real people underneath poking out or anything other than, Kathy's hair at the end, but that's not really much of anything to that. That's basically just pulling a wig off of of another wig on top of a statue or a wax figure. There's not really anything to that, but for the time period this takes place in, I didn't really expect any like big special effects. It was like 1953. Come on, you don't really expect that, but it does kind of add that there's not really much scares to this film. There's just not really much of anything to that. And again, that's just a product of the time. I feel this film wasn't really about the horror element as much as it was the thriller element and the aspect of, this insane person and his assistants, committing these murders and, almost committing certain murders, like the dude almost getting his head chopped off by the guillotine. It's like, yeah, that obviously is freaky, but I wouldn't call it like horror. This movie is horror on the basis of the time it came out, and that's pretty much it. Like, if this movie were released as it is today, it would not be considered horror. It would be considered a thriller, but not horror. So I'm not disappointed by that though, because like I said, I kind of expected it to be like that, just based on the time period. The pacing was fine. I had no real issue with that. I had no real issue with any of the music or whatnot. The audio levels were a little off, but that can happen with a lot of older movies. I felt like the music was really loud compared to the voices. But again, that can happen. This movie had a lot going for it, and for the time, like when this came out, this would have like been a big deal for people to see. It would be shocking and wild and intense, but because of the time. But nowadays, it's like nothing, of course. But that's fine. Like I said, I went into it knowing what to expect, and I enjoyed it for what it was. Like I said, it's good. Not great, but good. Because I do have to take into account my modern day viewpoints, at least a little bit. If I were to give it a rating, 7.5 to 8 out of 10, somewhere in that range. I would say somewhere in that range is pretty good, pretty accurate. It definitely is up there. It deserves to be like mentioned, and I can see why people who again grew up with this would like love it and praise it and everything. Again, it's just a matter of comparison to nowadays that it's like not really amazing by that standard. But yeah, uh, either way, I'm glad I saw this. I really am. I think that this was a worthwhile watch, and I'm happy that I got to check this out. So thank you all so much for tuning in. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. And for now, I'm Connie, and I'm signing off. See y'all next time.